Hi there, and welcome back to Wabi Sabi. We are going to talk about the missing link, which just happens to be, I think, a really interesting topic. It came, we were taking a walk, I think, last week, started talking about this, and it kind of developed into this episode. So, really excited about talking about this.
Yeah,
How do
I'm
you feel about it?
excited too. Yeah.
So, yeah, so to give everybody kind of an idea here, what we're going to talk about here is the missing link in behavioral interventions and parent training, and specifically, like, what is absent from ideas like sleep training, like limit setting, like sticker charts. And we're going to look at a different path. And we're going to start off with you, Jamie, Coach Jamie, who,
hmm
for those of you who don't know you, you are a sleep coach as well as a developmental pediatrician in training. So I think the next question is perfect for you. What is the idea behind behavioral intervention?
Right. So, behavioral intervention is basically teaching parents how to either change a behavior or redirect a child's behavior. And so, often, for a child, they're always working for the currency is parental attention, right? And so they want mom or dad's attention. And so with these behavioral interventions, often what they teach is either um, you know ignoring an unwanted behavior or um, giving more attention to a positive behavior. And so the idea is the more you ignore a negative behavior, it goes away. And the more you pay attention to a positive behavior, the more frequent it happens. So that's, I think, at the very basic of some of the behavioral strategies that are offered. Yeah.
And if we think of it, like, I love the wording here. I never heard it before today when you mentioned it earlier. The currency for a child, the currency is attention. If we keep that in mind, how would it help to ignore an unwanted behavior?
Right. And so, if a child tries to, let's say, for example, tantrum, right? So, throwing, not getting what he wants, or um, if you ignore the tantrum, the idea is a child can associate like, oh, I can cry and cry all I want, but I'm never going to get I'm after for me. It can be candy or whatever it is. But the idea is if you ignore the behavior, then eventually it goes away.
Because they're not getting that, the currency. They're not getting what they're looking for if you keep ignoring them, and then it goes away. And on the flip side, if they're doing something that you like, you give them more of that currency. You give them, like, oh, that was nice, great job, right? And then it will do it over and over again. That's the idea, right?
The idea, and then I want to reiterate that it is, you know, what they're going to do whatever they can to get the parental attention. So whether it's positive attention, which is, hugs and cuddles, or negative attention, where you're berating them or shouting or like, giving them redirection. So the idea here is that you are, um, if it's a negative behavior, you want less of it, right? And so just definitely ignore it. And if you want more of those positive behaviors, then you're going to encourage that by giving more positive attention. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that makes
The
total sense.
the currency here is getting attention from their parent, and not, yeah.
Not a certain type of attention. And I think that's why the currency, speaking of it as a currency, was so helpful, because
Mhm.
the child doesn't care if it's like negative or positive. It's
Yeah, it
it's the
doesn't
currency.
care.
This is what I want.
Yeah, exactly. So
Very, very well. So we talked about, like, the idea behind behavioral intervention, which I think is quite, ancient. That was the word that came to my mind, but it's like it came from, like, Pavlov and the dogs and all that, right? That's kind of where it all comes from, right?
right, yeah, conditioned behavior, definitely. And we know that the brain is likes to make associations, and so the more you do something, the more it makes that association, um, and then soon it's just the behavior the trigger and the response with making that association, the responses becomes more automatic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about the idea. Now we're going to look at some common examples of kind of like when you're told to do things that are based on this behavioral intervention idea in the sleep world, specifically when you're, a parent and your child, has some sleep struggles. And the first one, or the example we're going to look at, is curtain calls. What are
You,
curtain calls?
yeah. So, well, in the, I guess the medical world, they have a behavioral insomnia type that's called limit setting, where the child needs parental presence. So either the mom or dad in the room for them to be able to fall asleep, right? So what happens is they have curtain calls. So they usually, when you say it's lights out, you close you close all devices off, turn down the lights, and it's quiet time. And then they start saying, "Oh well, oh mom, I need to go to the bathroom, or I want another glass of water, or I want one more hug." So any kind of strategy and idea, again, they want, what's their currency? Attention, right? Anything that gets the parent back in the room is definitely is part of this issue. And so they have specific behavioral strategies um, that can be useful for this type of um, insomnia or problem at night.
Which we're going to look at, but just to kind of clarify to anyone that's tuning in here that um, the reason we have these curtain calls are really that a child feels somehow unsafe, and getting a parent's attention gives them like more of a sense of security and safety, which can allow sleep to happen. But from a parent's perspective, that may not be what we want. We may want to have some of our own time, right? So these curtain calls can be something that's not what we desire. So then comes the intervention. So can you talk about these typical behavioral interventions that we are told to deploy in the example of curtain calls?
Sure. So first, I mean, most, and I'm sure a lot of parents are familiar with this, is completely going cold turkey, where you completely ignore all types of curtain calls. So you just say it's lights out. You may even close the door and just ignore whatever bits of attention they may call out that night. And so for a lot of parents, they don't this doesn't really resonate with them, because it just makes their anxiety uh, or stress even more apparent when they're listening to a child's cry the whole night. So there are more, I would say, gentler strategies where it's a gradual extinction with stimulus fading. That what that means is that you can start in the bedroom with you sitting in some sort of chair, or just sitting there on the floor, and then kind of like move each night. You move yourself, um, oh, further away from the child's bed until you find yourself like outside the bed, but then also knowing that you're still present there somehow, right? Because they can still see you, but you're still ignoring any kind of bids for attention. So when they say, yeah.
So yes, to summarize this so far, the unwanted behavior here is the curtain calls, and we looked at completely ignoring them, which is like we're withdrawing that attention completely and immediately in the
Hmm.
hopes that the child would see, oh, I'm not getting any attention, I'm going to stop this behavior. Or we were withdrawing this attention gradually with the hopes that, oh, the child will see that they're getting less and less attention, and then kind of stop the curtain calls little by little. But
Hmm.
there's a different way. Now we looked at sort of the extinction approach, taking something away, but you can also reward behavior, right? And an example of that is the bedtime pass. So maybe talk a little bit about this.
Right. So the idea, like you already mentioned, you're still ignoring unwanted behavior. So you're not, you're trying to ignore any type of curtain call, but then you can give them, you maybe like a piece of paper where this is a bedtime pass. you can use this for any kind of reason that you want to get out of the bedroom. Maybe you want another hug, or a going to the bathroom, or going upstairs to get another glass of milk, um, and and that's fine. It's totally fine to use the pass for that night. But the idea is, if they stay in bed, if they stay in the bed, and then if they stop, you know, these curtain calls at night, if they're able to keep the pass overnight, then for the next day, that they can get a prize. So it's either a sticker or maybe a token if they stay in the bed for several nights and they get 3 tokens, then they can go to the store and buy something nice for them. So it's, the idea is, again, trying to ignore unwanted behavior at night with positive reinforcement the following day. And this can work for kids, obviously, developmentally, if they're ready for some delayed gratification, right? So for school age kids, it can probably work, especially if they're really wanting something. Yeah.
Very nice. So yeah, we summarized some of the the behavioral interventions here for this particular subject of curtain calls. But now the big reveal: what is the missing link?
The missing link. Sounds like, all right. So often, these are good strategies to kind of again, try to redirect behavior or extinguish some of these unwanted behaviors, right? But it totally eliminates or completely misses that internal experience that a parent has as this is playing out at night, right? So it doesn't really address, because we as parents have thoughts and feelings that drive our behaviors, right? And so as your child is crying for you at night, there are automatic thoughts that come up, and usually these thoughts are about a few things. We don't know this, but we're always trying to calculate how well we are parenting, and then also how well or well regulated your child is, and then how good of a person you are. It's like we're not completely aware of this, but as your child is, having these what quote unquote unwanted behaviors, a lot of these thoughts and feelings come up. And so that is the missing link. So when you are giving these strategies to parents, oftentimes, it doesn't really explore some of these thoughts and feelings underneath that happen. Yeah.
Totally. And you said this so nicely before I wrote it down, that you as a parent, you can enforce these interventions, but how do you feel about it, right? That's the part
Yeah.
that is not really talked about. It's basically it's like you just do things, do this, and this behavior will change. Maybe not, but more importantly, like how do you feel about this? And before I talk more about this, I just want to go back to this and talk about the stimulus fading idea. When you kind of like you start being next to your child in bed, then you sit in a chair, then you move the chair out, then you read about this in textbook, but when I was working as a sleep doctor and I saw tons of parents, I've never ever heard one single story of somebody who said, "Oh, that worked for me." It's just so unnatural. Like I think it's just made up by somebody thought this up, but I've never heard of anybody deploying that and seeing it helpful. Have you ever heard that?
Well, I mean, for sometimes they come back and it works, but they don't really understand why, or so I think it's just a missed opportunity to learn about yourself, and how how your internal experience drives a lot of your behavior. So, yeah. So I guess, yeah. So what is a good way? Like, I think you're gonna lead
Yeah,
into
yeah.
that,
No,
right? Yeah.
I just want to highlight that I've heard about this idea, but I honestly never think I don't believe in it particularly. I think there's a real um, um, potential conundrum with the bedtime pass and sticker charts too, which is like when we think we reward a behavior is essentially like rewarding an emotion, because our behaviors are driven by emotions, which are driven by our thoughts,
Our
can be
thoughts.
really, really tricky when we start like telling a child that having this emotion is good, not having that emotion is bad. Very, very tricky. So I'm not saying to anyone like never do any of this, but quite tricky territory. And the missing link again is like, how do we feel about this? And specifically, like, how do you feel about this situation when your child is kind of coming out trying to get you and you're saying no? How do you feel about that? How do you think of yourself as a parent? How are your feelings received by your child or your partner? Like when you which I think, just as we're going over these like bets, like these behavioralistic
Scenarios,
interventions,
yes.
personally I almost cringe when I hear them, like, how, oh, it's hard to do that. And if you're feeling kind of like maybe anxious, you're feeling guilty, you're feeling upset, you're feeling frustrated because you're doing these behavioral interventions, how do you think that is going to be felt by your child or your partner? The feelings are contagious. They're very likely to also start feeling like uneasy, upset, nervous, right?
Yeah.
And does that matter? Like, does how we feel about the decision matters? Yes, it varies very, very much, because again, if we are upset, guilty, anxious, nobody will have a peaceful night. Our partner won't have a peaceful night. Our child will not have a peaceful night. So how we feel about this, the missing link, matters very, very much. I would argue that the missing link probably matters more than anything else, in my humble opinion. So far we've seen kind of like the potential problems with these kind of traditional behavioral interventions. But then anybody tunes in here may wonder, okay, so we see this, but what am I supposed to do, and where's that different path that you alluded to? And I think of it much this way, that first of all, like, seeing that our thoughts about ourselves matter much, that awareness alone is so helpful. Because when we don't have that, then then we might be like, okay, I'm going to try this gradual fading. Oh no, now it's not working. I'm not doing it right. What am I doing wrong? You get nervous, your child gets nervous, and you're not seeing that, oh, okay, the reason this is happening is because I'm criticizing myself for not being able to be a good parent, for not being
Right.
able to control my emotions, et cetera, et cetera. And we're
Mm-hmm.
automatically in this loop of struggle without really fully understanding why. So just
True.
understanding, just this awareness of the missing link, awareness of like how your own thoughts about the situation is driving everything, I think that is super, super happy. It's super, super helpful, I want to say.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, like sometimes it's a thought about your parenting, but sometimes it's also a thought about your child. So like, oh, he has trouble sleeping. Could this mean he has an underlying developmental disorder, right? Or you're also, sometimes it's a thought about you and your partner, where like I'm always the one doing bedtime, and that all. So it's just being aware, and kind of next time it does come up, and just writing down all the, not, you don't have to write it down, but just being aware of like the thoughts and like how it feels in your body can be very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, super, super helpful. And by the way, I want to, for anyone who's looking for some more like practical tips, etc., like do check out our previous episode on the timeless sleep window, which I think is practical and really helpful. But now along the lines of this different path, I think what really matters is looking at, okay, what do we really want here? And it can seem so easy. It can seem like, well, I just want my child to sleep. But imagine like if you had a remote control. Imagine if you literally had a remote
Yeah.
control and you could turn your child on and off, like turn them awake or turn them asleep. Like, would you be happy? No, no, you wouldn't. That feels so unnatural and so odd and so weird. We don't want that. We don't want that, like, control over our kids' behavior, control over our kids. That's not what we want. What we want is peace of mind and peaceful
Peaceful
nights.
night.
That is actually what we want, right? And where does that come from? That comes from seeing this missing link. It comes from seeing that what matters is how I think about myself, how I think about myself as a parent, how I think about my child. And I see this missing link really is like an invitation for this self exploration. And when we see that, oh, these behavioral interventions, they're quite tricky, and I'm not sure they actually helped anyone. But I see that there's nothing wrong with me. there's nothing wrong with the thoughts I'm having, the way I parent. It's all like I'm just a regular parent doing my best, right? And when we
Trying to
see
do your best.
that,
Yep.
I think that leads to so much peace and less struggle and peacefulness and everything what we want. So that to me, is the different path.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the great thing about this is, it's you can translate this to any kind of trigger. We know that the unwanted behaviors go beyond bedtime, right? So anytime your child is throwing a tantrum or is having a fit while you're in the grocery store, so that can be a chance of self-exploration, like you had mentioned, and just say, how is this? What thoughts come up about my parenting, about my child, about life as the situation is coming up. And I also want to point out that you mentioned, yes, peace with yourself, but also chance to like bringing awareness to everything can make you actually see your child, like and connect with your child in a different way.
Yeah, I think you opened up something really, really fascinating, interesting. But can you expand on that? The last thing you said there?
So I think sometimes when we see, often when you have unwanted behaviors, so I kind of feel like you see your child as someone bad or someone who is un non-compliant child, right? Versus if you're paying attention to what's going underneath, all your thoughts and feelings that come up as your child is, presenting himself with these unwanted behaviors, um, then and just seeing that, oh, he's not he's having a really rough time right now, and I myself have rough times that I have find myself having more difficult having more difficult time regulating, and that giving your child grace, because when we understand how, the missing link is when we understand our internal experience, then we can extend that and kind of trying to understand what his internal experience is, right? And so we can extend that kind of, like you say, compassion or understanding that he can have difficult time just like you're having a difficult time. I hope that kind of makes
No, it,
sense.
it made it
Yeah.
made a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I heard that, I was sort of like, with the first thought in my mind became something like, when we're so caught up in the struggle to try to change our child's behavior,
Yeah.
we're missing out on just connecting with them and sort of
Yeah,
understanding what they're going
absolutely.
through, right?
Right. We're so caught up in all the things like trying to be a perfect parent or trying to make your child more compliant, then you're kind of missing out on a lot of opportunities to learn about yourself and get to know your child, I should
Yeah.
say.
Wonderful. Perfect time
All right.
to spot to end today's episode on the Wabi Sabi channel. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And as always, comments, questions, let us know in the comment section, and look forward to having you back next time.
Next time. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.